Hi there, this is Scott. I am just setting up the stream. We're going live here with answering some of the common questions from the community. So let me just get this launched here. I beg your indulgence, thank you. Coming to you live from Toronto, Canada. Today's February 1st, so we're already through 1 month of the year. Let me click live on that. What I'm doing right now is I'm not a pro at this going live stuff. So I have launched the live stream onto YouTube. If you're watching me on YouTube, thank you. And I just launched the live stream into Facebook as well. And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to share the live stream, I guess, in a couple of spaces. So thank you for, is that how it looks? Oh, I'm going to have to figure out how to make this bigger. All right, go into my group here. See, going live, answering questions. I don't like the look of that. Again, this is Scott. Thank you for checking this out. I'm going to be going live in just a second. As soon as I figure out what I need, what I really need is like an assistant who can do all this stuff while I'm talking, right? So I'm just sharing this. I'm sharing this live stream into the Azure group. I'm going to see. Going live answering questions. All right. I'm going to trust that I see there's 3 people on Facebook. Go on to YouTube here. Again, complete amateur at this. So at the live bits. Oh, okay. So live now too watching. Thank you if you're watching me from YouTube. Thanks for watching me from Facebook. Here I am. My name is Scott. Thank you so much. Again, I'm here to answer some questions. The Facebook groups and Twitter and YouTube have been great in asking some questions. So I put together this little question thing to put together to see if there's questions that need to be answered. It's a quiet Saturday here in Toronto. Tomorrow I'm heading down to California to do some stuff for LinkedIn Learning, so I'll be traveling tomorrow. But while we're here, we got a little few minutes to talk about some things. All right, feel free. I'm going to have the, actually I can do this within my software. I'm going to have like the questions that if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll see the stream. If you're watching this on Facebook, see the questions there. I'll do my best. But I did put together some questions, some common questions that we've been seeing, and I posted into the groups and got a bunch of questions out of there too. So if you ask this question and these questions, then hopefully I'm covering it here today. Anyways, so Andre asked, what is the difference between AWS and Azure from a practical point of view, as opposed to like the advertising that AWS and Azure have? Now, I will say both of those companies have web pages devoted to convincing you why their platform is better. And I will say, in all honesty, I mean, of course, I'm a little biased towards Azure. This is where I've spent a lot of my time in the past 3 or 4 years. But I am AWS certified as an architect. I'm also Azure certified as an architect. I do have a broad amount of knowledge about both. I would say that if you were to look feature for feature among the top 100 or 200 features of each platform, they're fairly comparable. Like AWS has their EC2 instances and Azure has their VMs, and you go down the networks and the step functions and logic apps and Lambda and functions, and you go down all feature for feature. There's a lot of similarities. So you're not going to find that one platform can do something and the other platform just can't do it. It's not typically the case. What I would often say is that the differences are really on the periphery or on the edges. So if you have a really specialized use case, if you have a specific, you're running SAP HANA and you've got your massive 64, 128 CPU servers and you need this particular type of server and one might have it and one might not have that. So when you're looking at the very edge use cases, maybe there's some feature differences. I think that a lot of the surveys that we see, and I just posted one a couple weeks ago, that Microsoft had made a lot of inroads into big enterprises. And so the Fortune 500, Fortune 100, the penetration of Azure in those environments compared to AWS, Azure might even have a lead, according to the Goldman Sachs survey, a significant lead of more than 10% of companies using Azure versus AWS. Now, on a whole, it does seem that more companies, if you just added up every company in existence, more companies use AWS compared to Azure. I don't know if the number of companies that use each platform is going to impact your specific use case for it. So it's a statistic, it's a trivia, but is it relevant is a question. So feature for feature, they're pretty much the same. Big enterprises tend to use Azure. We just saw the government, the U.S. military, select Azure for the JEDI project, which is still being debated in the courtroom. But it does seem that Azure has some features that big companies like. There's also the use cases of third-party features that, whether it's native to be built into the platform or whether you need some external thing to make it work. And there's probably things within AWS that need third-party services to work, like, I don't know. But within Azure, there might be some things as well. So you're going to be doing that. I particularly like Azure. I find it interesting to work with. I think they've got the energy and the excitement right now. AWS is sort of, I haven't seen it capture people's attention in the same way. Practically, there's not much difference. On the periphery, there might find some difference. I'll say one thing, like I saw a test recently where AWS EC2 instance and the same size VM in Azure were tested side by side. And the person was claiming that an AWS EC2 instance provides a little bit more operations per second compared to the same in Azure. And that proves that the AWS hypervisor is more efficient at passing the raw performance of the hardware through to the VM as opposed to Azure. Again, so one is cheaper, one is better performing. It's a tough question to answer. I like Azure, but you can't go wrong choosing either. I will say this is not true of Google, right? So Google is not feature for feature parity. There's a lot of things Google can't do. I don't have a full list of them right now, but if you went down the list of 500 features, Azure and AWS are fairly even. Maybe one's missing one, but the other's missing another. But Google has just got whole areas of things that are missing. So it's true of AWS versus Azure. Google Cloud has still got some catching up to do. Next question is, some people ask is, hey, I want to, should I get into AZ900? That's the fundamentals exam that Microsoft offers, the basics. It's totally optional. My default answer is, if you're interested in pursuing lots of certifications, you're going to go for 103 and the administrator. You're going to go for architect. You want to go for DevOps. Maybe you don't need to go for 900 because it's, it's just another $90 you're going to spend, and it's another couple of weeks of your time. You may want to just skip over that first step and go right to 103 if that's your first step. But if you really do want a solid foundation of Azure, how support works, how features work, general availability, public cloud versus private cloud, all of those topics, there might be some interest in there. I did AZ900, but obviously I did it after I had already known. I was already an architect and an administrator and a developer, and I did AZ900 almost after, because I'm doing courses on it. So to me, it's not required. but it might be interesting to you. So it's not ever a mistake to do it. If you've got a serious tech background and you really want to move into other things, maybe you don't need it. It's a fair answer, I think. But speaking to that, what do you do if you've got no technical background? And some people come to me and say, I want to get into AZ-103, Azure Administrator, but I just don't know anything about computers technology. I've got a business background. I'm a project manager. That's one thing where the AZ-900 could be a good judge of whether you want to continue. So you get into it, you study for 900, you pass that test, and then you say, okay, that was easy or that was hard. And, so before you decide, like, this is like, I've never run before, should I do a marathon? Maybe not. Maybe you should try to do a 5K or a 10K before you jump into marathon running. So, but if you do have a technical background, like I said, you can sort of get right into studying for your marathon. But I think you have to find out where your interests lie, because in this big world of cloud and computing that we're in, I should check that the okay, there's some questions. I should check that the sound is working. There's a lot of you watching, so that must be working. Actually, let me because okay, I unmuted it and I can hear myself. So I apologize about this letterbox format. First of all, I'm a Azure expert, but a Facebook amateur. So, anyways, so where was I? Yeah, where do you start if you have no technical background? I would say find your interest. So if you're into artificial intelligence, there's a whole area for that. If you're into databases, there's an area for that. If you want to get into learning command lines and manipulating computers using the command line, there's a test for that development. So I think you need to find out where your aptitudes and where your interests lie, because there's no point learning something and becoming an expert at something that you're not actually interested in. So let's call that my advice for that. I think I meant this. How do I learn Azure free? So this should say, how do I learn Azure free? That is always a challenge, because Microsoft Azure you're using real computing services. When you spin up a server, a 2 CPU or a 4 CPU server, you're actually using the CPU and the hard disk and electricity and the serving power from Microsoft. And so you're sort of hoping that Microsoft is willing to pay for your use of it while you're learning it. Sometimes they do. Now, I do like the Microsoft Azure Learn, so microsoft.com/learn. There are some pros and cons to that. I'm going to pull in the Learn website here. There are some pros and cons to that. So let's say there's an Azure Fundamentals thing. It's almost 10 hours of a learning path. Now I think there's a little exaggeration in terms of the number of hours that it takes, but it's a 10-hour learning path. I should switch my face out of here. How about that? 10-hour learning path just to get into the fundamentals. And if you want to learn storage and security and architecture, there are, let's look at the learning paths here, right? So there's a lot of content here, and Microsoft has clearly got dozens and 100+ people to, you can see my tweets as they come in. Microsoft has a lot of people creating this content. The downside to this is there's not a lot of video content. These are going to be a lot of reading. There's going to be quizzes to take and things like that. You look in the fundamentals, you're not actually working within Azure for any of this. It might be that there's you go into like an exercise, create a website hosted in Azure. So another great thing about this is they've got this sandbox concept. And let's look at the, if there's a thing about the sandbox, but they're giving you, I think there's a limit to it per day, right? So why don't you just answer the basic question? I think it's like 10 per day, if I'm not mistaken. What are the limitations? All right. So I think there's only a few, like you can only create a few of these per day. So over a period of time, if you're not in a rush to learn it, you can just go through all the Microsoft Learn content and using your own personal account. It doesn't charge you, but it is limited. It's not unlimited free, and you're not going to sign in here and then start like mining Bitcoin. They're going to detect that you're not following the instructions, and they might say you may have violated some sort of rule. So if your intention is to learn Azure for free, you can go in and create sandboxes. And I think someone said it's like 10 per day. And just over a period of time, you can get lots of practice. So that would be my caveat to that. The other thing is the free account, of course. So unless you, I think it's azure.microsoft.com/free. And that's 30 days. 30 days of $200 credit. And so if you're in a rush and you want to learn this, you can just take any credit card, any email address that you have, get in there, create a 30-day account and get $200 credit. You also get 12 months of these VMs. You can get 2 VMs a month for 12 months, plus storage, plus SQL database. So you get some services that are free for 12 months and some that are things. So if you want to learn for free, I go to learn, find out these modules that are interesting to you, and you can find lots of text, lots of practices in here. That's my advice. But put the hands-on labs as a second thing. Okay, so the next question is, how do I get Azure hands-on labs? Now, Microsoft, if you don't know, used to have hands-on labs site. So I'm going to go Google Microsoft hands-on labs. I am number 7 position in search for hands-on labs. Okay. So you go into the hands-on labs and the self-paced labs, and it kind of fools you into thinking, oh my God, there's 92 labs that I can choose. And so you can go in here and say, I want to be an administrator, and let me create this PostgreSQL hands-on lab. But then you click on it, and it was a psych out. They're taking you to Microsoft Learn and right to the homepage, so it's not even really directly helpful. So Microsoft has just decided this is too expensive, I guess, even for a company like Microsoft, to support millions of dollars of free resources. People are taking these things for 60 minutes and who knows what. So obviously the Azure Learn is the future of hands-on labs. I'm creating hands-on labs for my own courses, and so there'll be Scott Duffy's hands-on labs, but sort of Microsoft goes, it's the Microsoft Learn website. Someone asked, what's changed recently in the Azure exams? Now, I have done a whole video. I'm going to go into my YouTube channel here. Oh, I'm going to switch over to I got to be good with this like live streaming thing. I'm not as good as I should be. I'm going to go to my YouTube channel here, and if I can suggest you find me, Software Architect, on YouTube, and I do have a detailed 8-minute, 10-minute video here on the details of the changes as we know it so far, an overview of the changes that we know for some of these things. So I would recommend that. I'm not going to go through the details one by one. I will summarize it to say that, sorry. Every once in a while, I look over at myself. This is what a video I'm talking about. So I have a 9-minute video on the Azure changes, a 5-minute video on the individual exams, etc. All right. So, yeah, I will say that to me, there's a simplification. So the Azure Administrator and one of the Azure Architect exams, 301, there's just been less topics, no new topics added. For the 203 and for 300, there's some percentage weightings, and maybe Azure Backup and Azure Monitoring have become more prominent with some shifting around. I don't know if that makes it easier. So I've seen some people say it's easier. I should wait. It's easier. I don't know if it makes it easier. You're getting less topics. So let's say the exam is on 50 topics, and then after March or April, it's going to be on 45 topics or 40 topics. Maybe it's going to be harder in those areas. So we don't know. It's actually, I wouldn't say it's early to say it's easier. Somebody's going to have to take it and come back and answer the question, is it easier? So I would send you to my YouTube channel if you want to get the details on the changes of individual exams. Someone asked a loaded question about what I think about Microsoft under Satya Nadella. I saw this. This is not the first time this question has been asked, and I don't know what's recently happened that has prompted this. So I'm maybe out of the loop here. I am a huge fan of Bill Gates, and I think that Microsoft's direction in the past, before Azure, before the age of Azure, was Windows Office, and they were making their money selling this software. They had a little Xbox division, they had a little keyboard division, but it was always these two pillars, Windows and Office. And I think the age of the internet has pushed out their Office stuff a little bit. Right now I'm using Google Docs, so it's hard for me to Azure, before the age of Azure, say, a Microsoft Office. This is a Google Docs spreadsheet. So I think I'm still paying in some places for Office, but they're not getting hundreds of dollars a month out of me. Windows is still dominant, obviously, but I think they've recognized Azure as the cloud, and Microsoft 365 and Office 365. And so I think Satya has done a good job of transitioning Microsoft from the old way of making money to a new way. I don't know of anything bad about Satya. So I saw, I wasn't able to get into his keynote, even though I was in the building. They wristbanded. You have to get there at 4 a.m. I just wasn't there on time. But I guess I'm a fan of Satya. I loved Microsoft from the Bill Gates days, and Satya, I don't have anything bad to say about him. Oops. Okay. Some questions have been coming about this Azure DevOps certification. Should I wait to take DevOps until after the changes? So first of all, they have not announced any changes to the AZ400 exam itself. Okay, so we don't maybe that they're going to get around to changing it, but they have not announced that they're changing it. My understanding is that the DevOps exam is the prerequisite for it is a certification under administrator or developer. So it's not that you have to take the 103 specifically to get the Azure DevOps. You can take 103 or 104 when that comes out, and then take DevOps. So you can take it now if you want to. There's no harm. You can take it in the future if you want to. The exam isn't changing as far as I know. And the prerequisite is the certification, not the exam. Now, that's not the same as the 300 and 301. Did I put that as a question? I'm going to presume that, I think I did put it as a question. So I'm going to talk about the 300 and 301 situation later, because I think there's a risk there. I get a lot of questions asking which one should I go for, 103 or 203? It's a very individualized decision, I think 103 and the precursor was 100. I took that in beta in 100, and so that was one of my first certifications in the new set, the AZ set. But I don't have an administrator background. I was a developer, for 20 years before I got into teaching. Was a developer, so I almost come from a 203 developer background, but I don't have. But I took the AZ103 first. So I think it's, I said earlier, it's all about your individual preferences. You know, when you find something that you like, you're more likely to study harder, study longer. There's going to be some intuitive knowledge that you can answer a question even if you've never studied it before, versus something that you're not interested in. So, you know, I don't have an answer to this question, but I think the 103 exam, or now the 104 exam, is going to be pretty straightforward because you are deploying servers and optimizing them and scaling and monitoring and backing up. Those are concrete goals for studying. The 203 is a little bit more like develop for storage. Well, what does develop for storage mean? I guess you need to know how to call the Azure SDK APIs within your C# code. You need to be able to set up a cloud account, things like that. But do you need to, maybe you need to understand the life cycle of files and how things can go into hot storage and cool storage and things like that. I think 203 is a harder thing for Microsoft to test you on. So I think 103, it's hard as it is, or as easy as it is, it's concrete. There's a wall, there's a boundary. You expect this kind of question, you don't expect that kind of question. I think 203, some people ask me, is there coding questions on 203? And the answer is you're not going to write code. You're never going to sit down and there's not going to be a Visual Studio command line and you're going to have to create some code. But they will present you with code and you might need to like drag and drop it into the right spot. That's less likely to happen on 103. You're more likely to get automation scripts and PowerShell and things like that. So I think 103 is a clearer target. 203 though, maybe you're a developer, lifelong developer, you've got no interest in scaling and monitoring and backups. Well, then maybe 203 is better for you. Maybe that's my last question. So I'm going to go into the chats now. So let me go back to here. All right. I've got YouTube chat open and there are too many. So Zanping says, there are too many things I have to learn. Can you tell me where's the best place to start? Yes. So if you're just starting out, like if you're really just like never learned cloud computing at all before, I would say the fundamentals path. So let me go back into Microsoft Learn. Let me take my ugly face off of the screen. I think this, now it says 10 hours, which is a decent amount of time, but I think if you were to go into the Microsoft Azure Fundamentals path, and you can see these are made up of various courses, modules, shall we say. So there's the hour here and an hour here and 45 minutes here, etc., etc. I would go down that path, and you're going to start to find things that you're interested in, and then maybe things that you're, not at all interested in. So that might be the place to start. Maybe networking drives you crazy. Maybe you love security, right? So there's going to be, start with the fundamentals path and then find out where your interest is. And if you're like, I want to learn way more about security, the security is the future of, big money in there, big jobs. That might be a logical like phase 2, but start with this path and then find out where your interests lie. You're absolutely right. You can't learn anything. I don't know everything. That's absolutely true. Make a video on the new AZ300 syllabus. I think I do have that. So Sanjeev says make a video on the new 300 syllabus. I wonder if I can add these questions into, give me a second here. I'm going to see if I can add YouTube widget live chat. Widget not yet authorized. Okay. So I'm going to try, I'm all right, I don't have time to set this up. Okay. There's a chat widget for the software that I'm using, but I don't have time to set it up. Okay, so I will say that, let me drag in here, go back to my channel. So for Sanjeev asking, I do have a video here comparing AZ300 with 303 and 301 and 304. Okay, so absolutely check that out. All right, back to YouTube. I'll get to Facebook in a second as well, but let's just check YouTube first. There's no, is there any prerequisite for AZ300? There is no prerequisite for AZ300. All right. Is scripting necessary to become a solution architect? There will be questions, because if you look at the, I'll even go to the new AZ, well, let's look at AZ300. If you look at the requirements for this exam, even the new one, there is a deploy and configure infrastructure, which is now 40%, but it's going to be 50% of the exam. So is there a requirement for scripting? Unfortunately, yes. Microsoft is still looking at being able to work with the hardware directly as being an architecture skill, even to the point of, like I said, half of the exam being working on architecture skills. So sorry about that, but that is the way it is. Oh, let me go back to here. All right. Does Azure support Python? That is, I'm not a huge Python person, but so I'll say there's two things. One is there's a Python SDK. Oh, there's even a web page, but there's Azure Web Apps do support Python, so you can deploy Python into Azure. And there's also Python SDK. I think you can implement SDK libraries using pip apparently into Python. So you can have Azure in your Python, and you can put Python into Azure. So pretty straightforward. All right, thank you, YouTube. I'm going to switch over to Facebook now. This is a little risk. Maybe it's a little risk. I'm going to switch into Facebook now, and we had the chat window here. Seen most of these questions. So, I said I was going to answer this question, but I didn't put it in the slides. Should I take AZ300 now or wait until the new exams come out? I've been thinking about this, and obviously there's some uncertainty because it doesn't seem like Microsoft is going to, they're going to say AZ300 and 301 gets you the expert certification, or 303 and 304 gets you the certification. And I don't know if 300 and 304 will also. They haven't announced it. It is to me, it's a coin flip. 50-50 chance that they allow it, and 50-50 chance that it doesn't. So it's a risk. And I think if you can do 300 and 301 between now and say May, so it's February 1st, February, March, April, if you can do it within the 3 or 4 months, then why not do it? Why wait, right? But if you can't complete these two exams in a 4-month period, then maybe you should wait. It's going to be up to you. All right, that was the question, A103 or 203. Are you ever planning to make a course on AZ 120? Is that the Internet of Things one? SAP. All right, I'm pretty confident that me personally do not know anything about SAP, and so I personally would not be creating a course on AZ 120. That said, if somebody does want to make a course on this and wants to work with me on it, I'm I would be open to discussing some way of it working together, splitting the income, and you can create the videos or maybe just create the slides. Anyways, personally, I don't see this for 2020. Let's say for this year, I don't see AZ 120 coming from me. But again, I'm always open to working with people. If you don't have a credit card, what should you do to get an Azure account? I think I touched on this a little bit, but there is a so you can't get an Azure free account without a credit card, but there's such a thing as an Azure student account. So you do not need a credit card to sign up for Azure for students, but you do need to be a student. So that would be like let's say starting there is if you're a student at an accredited university or college, you can sign up and get a credit account without a credit card. Otherwise, you're restricted to going to the Microsoft Learn site and again finding these exercises. Don't break their NDAs or their not NDAs but their requirements, and follow the exercises. But those are the two things. The only thing I would say is these are real resources. When you spin up a server, even if it's a virtual server, you're using Microsoft's power and electricity and hardware and the wear and tear on that machine. It is costing them money. So to expect a lot of it for free is going to be hard. So I would like to get Azure certificates and started on AZ 900. What path should I take following AZ 900? That's a highly individual question. I agree. If you're sort of just putting your toe into it, AZ 900 is a great place to start. For M65 or M365, Microsoft has. So let's look at the Microsoft certification path. So Microsoft put out, and I might even have to go to they put out a PDF recently that shows all their certifications. Yeah. There's a PDF for this. Sorry for the scrolling. They're moving some stuff to learn. Okay, so forgive me. I'm going to go to my LinkedIn. I did post this to my profile. There is a PDF showing all of the. I guess this is where Scott shows he doesn't know how to get all his posts. Where's my posts at? All right. So there is a PDF Microsoft shared late last year. Oh, there's the poster. Okay. This is the only way I can think of getting this. So there is a poster showing all of the certifications in one. And I will post this back here. I'm going to post this into the chat here. And so if you are interested in Microsoft 365, then there's an MS 900 for Microsoft 365 fundamentals, and then there's a whole Microsoft 365 track. So that's the one part of your question. If you're just interested in more Azure stuff, not specifically Microsoft 365, then you might want to get into, if you're already an administrator, and you might want to get into AZ 103, which is Azure administration. There is also security certification as well. So this, take a look at this and see what path that makes the most sense for you. It's very hard for me to put myself in your shoes and know what's going to make you happy, what you're going to be excited to learn. So take the 900. If that's what you're doing, finish it. And like I said in the earlier thing, you might discover that getting Microsoft 365 certified makes sense for you. Or maybe you're like, I'm sick of it. I want to get into more normal Azure stuff. And you go into 103 and maybe some other things from there. All right. Yeah, I mean, we're going to get these questions about whether I should wait to take 204 as opposed to doing the 203. So 204 is coming out the earliest, right? So 203, the 204 beta is coming in February, which is this month. It's the first, according to the, if you believe it, the first exam that is coming to beta. So should you take that? Maybe it's close enough that you're going to get this new credential. Apparently there's going to be a new badge for it with the updated date on it or something. So there's probably some extra benefit to passing 204, but keep in mind that if it's in beta in February and March, and we have to wait perhaps through April and maybe May to get the results, if you take the test in February, you might even be waiting until late April, early May to find out if you passed or not. So there are some advantages to taking 203. So I can see both sides. And yeah, that's my answer, is it's going to be highly independent. Anyways, I'm going to start to wrap this up. It's getting close to 150. Let me check Twitter real quick. I posted this to Twitter to see if anyone's asked a question. All right, ask me anything. I'm going to record a video. What are your thoughts on the new Azure exam changes? Thanks, Gregor. I did post, let me go back to my channel here. So I did post this to Azure, and I did talk about this earlier in the video. How do you set up the VM to have multiple RDP sessions at the same time? That's more like a Windows question. So in terms of Azure, what I would do, this is exactly what I would do. I would say Windows VM multiple sessions. And I would find Windows Server, like if you want Windows, let's say 2019 server. So that's really, you're really going to be looking at a Windows forum for the answer to that. Top 3 features that are most challenging for AZ500. So I took AZ500 in beta, and I really liked the test. I came out of the test thinking that was a fair test. There was no trick questions. The way that they set it up, I'm not going to validate my NDA here specifically, but I don't think I'm validating my NDA to say they gave you some scenarios where these are the VMs, these are the VNets, these are the subnets, this is the security rules. So they set you up with, this is what the environment's like with data, with details. This is the name, this is the IP address, this is the range, this is the rule. And then they asked you, could internet traffic travel to VM1? And so you had to sort of like look up at 4 tables and say, does this rule allow traffic to travel here, etc. So to me, the challenge for AZ500 wasn't, I'm pretty familiar with how traffic flows, but even then there's some complexity. Sometimes you can have multiple NSGs on one side of the VNet and one side of the VM, and so things like that, and Azure Firewall, and there's other things that can stop stuff. So I think it was more just the level of sort of the attention to detail. I can't think of anything else. It wasn't tricky, but there was a lot of detail. So hold on. How am I? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to update my courses. So personally, my courses will be updated. It'll be updated, right? So, all right. I'm going to call that. I'm going to call that the end of my live stream. I hope this was useful to you. I'm going to go back to my thing here. Back to my presentation. Where's my presentation? There it is. Thank you so much for tuning it in, and we'll do this again. So, Take care. Leave any questions. I'll answer some of the questions that have come up on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, in various places. But hopefully this is useful. This has been Scott. Thanks a lot. And I'm going to figure out now how to shut this down. And bye.